Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on Book Repair Basics with Library. I'm Stephanie. On behalf of the ALEX Continuing Education Committee, I'm delighted to introduce our presenters Peter Verheyen and Marianne Hanley. Peter Verheyen is Head of Preservation and Conservation at Syracuse University Library. Peter began his career in preservation as a work study student with John Dean at Johns Hopkins, where he repaired and rehoused circulating collections. Graduation, he studied binding and conservation in Switzerland. Since then, he has worked both in private practice and research library preservation. At Syracuse, he established the Conservation Lab for the treatment of special collections materials and developed a high-density storage system for architectural drawings. At Archival 101, an ALEX webinar. Marianne Hanley is Assistant Conservator in the Department of Preservation and Conservation at Syracuse as well. Her responsibilities include managing the repair and rehousing of circulating collections, including the training of work study students. She is also continuing bookbinding and conservation training with conservators David Stocco and Hines. Marianne has worked in both public and academic libraries. She is collaborating with the development of a basic book repair program that will benefit many different institutions at varying types of skill levels. Before we begin, a few quick notes on today's webinar. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them in the chat box on your screen, and our presenters will do their best to answer as many questions as possible at the conclusion of the presentation. Also, please note that today's presentation will be recorded, and you will receive an email with a link to that recording shortly after the conclusion of the webinar. The presentation will also be archived and freely available at the ALEX webinar website. Thanks to Neil Schumann Publishers for sponsoring this webinar so it could be made freely available to everyone. I also wanted to note that some of you have said that your colleagues are having some difficulty in logging in, so please let them know that the webinar will be posted and freely available to everyone on the ALEX website, and we apologize for that inconvenience. With that, I'll turn the program over to Peter and Marianne.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. So today's presentation is entitled Book Repair Basics for Libraries, and at the beginning we'll just outline the aims and scope of our presentation. What we're going to try to do is familiarize all of you with the different aspects of circulating collections repair for a wide variety of libraries, whether it's a school, a public, or an academic. And we'll do that by showing you techniques with images and video as well. The video is kind of a first, so we'll see how that goes. This presentation should not, however, be construed as a how-to workshop. And at the end of our workshop, what we'll do is we'll give you resources for further training, but we will be showing you in more or less real time how a lot of these basic repairs are completed. And it's not aimed at the treatment of special collections items in any regard. And that's really something where we'll talk again at the end about how to find a conservator to work with on those.
Circulating collections repair at Syracuse and many other research academic libraries. Materials are retained for the long term. As a research facility library that serves the university, we are responsible for collecting, organizing, and providing access to scholarly information. Our weeding of collections is very selective. When an item is weeded or deselected, any decision to withdraw an item must take into consideration the value of the item to future research and teaching. Selection criteria for repair: in general, the item circulates, and upon its return, library staff observes the physical condition of the book is poor and its physical integrity has been compromised. We also periodically, proactively concentrate on certain areas of the collection that are heavily used. Our types of treatment: when an item comes into the preservation lab, we set up a triage area where we decide what type of treatment each item needs. It could be just a simple repair, Maybe it just needs a page tipped back in or its hinge tightened. Or it could be something a little more involved like a spine repair rebacking, where maybe the spine is torn or ripped and we need to replace it. Or it could be something where the binding has been split in pieces and we need to completely rebind it, and with this we would send it to a commercial bindery pretty much because we can't repair it here, and instead we would send it out because the cost versus the in-house repair would be much more cost effective. In a completely different mentality, we have the public and school library context. Materials that are not necessarily retained for the long term. This would be items that would circulate, we would repair them, they would circulate, we would repair, circulate again, and then we would weed them. You would pretty much get your money's worth out of the item, and we're talking about something along the lines of maybe a Harry Potter book. Treatments often minimal to enable a few more circulations. What we would do is not address the complex structural issues, things like spines or detached boards. These would be more likely to use self-adhesive products rather than wet adhesives. Things that would require less infrastructure and training. It would be a quicker sort of a peel in place on the item. These would not be used for the long term. We would think of this more as a quick fix.
So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover the tools that are used in book repair, and those are fairly universal even with advanced conservation treatments. Adhesives and other materials. We will show some simple repairs, mending tears, doing a tip-in, hinge tightening. We'll also show some spine repairs, a simple, what I'm calling quick and dirty, or as we also say here, meatball surgery, where we're replacing just the spine, the boards are still well attached, and then also one that's a little bit more involved, where we're going to replace a completely missing spine, the boards are off, and things like that.
The slide that you see in front of you is examples of essential tools that we use in the book repair process. I'll start from the right-hand side with just a large pair of scissors. As we move on, you'll see we used a straight edge knife. This is important that you keep the knife blade sharp by replacing the blades often. Next, onto the left-hand side, you'll see a tool called an awl, which is a pointed tool used for making holes, and we use for sewing pamphlets into binders, but that is another class. The next tool that you'll see is the bone folder, and the bone folder is a dull-edged device used to crease material. It's often made from animal bone, hence its name, and there's also synthetic alternatives available that are made from plastics or Teflon. In the videos, which you will see shortly, we've used the Teflon bone folder. You'll also see that the tools are lying on a cutting mat, and that's for protecting your cutting surfaces. And next would be the brushes. It's important to clean the tools after use to keep in good working order.
In terms of adhesives, we're going to avoid duct tape, packing tape, rubber cement, glue sticks, all of which somehow find their way into book repair operations at one time or another, or we get to deal with the consequences. These are some rather dramatic images that were provided by an intern of ours here at Syracuse. And you can see in the image on the right, they've gotten very creative in helping protect the images. While horrible in terms of their impact on the item, they are generally well-intentioned. Some other adhesive products that we would use are these that are commercially available from vendors such as Capco, Gaylord, Demco, pretty much all the library vendors. And these are used to hold magazines together, protect the corners of the books, apply a simple repair at the head or tail, that's the top or bottom of the spine of the book, just to keep things together. And they are not necessarily something that we're going to cover in this workshop. The adhesives that we use for our repairs are archival PVA, which it's a white glue. It's like Elmer's, but it's formulated to be a lot more flexible. And that's important because if the adhesive is very stiff, then it causes the spine of the book to crack and fall apart sooner than it would. For repairing tears with rare book conservation, we use Japanese paper and wheat paste. In the context of most of our circulating collections repair, we'll end up using a product like Filmoplast P, which is an acid-free tissue kind of paper with an acrylic adhesive that's not going to discolor or ooze or anything like that, and it just goes on better.
What you see in front of you is some simple repairs, things like a page tear on the left-hand side, and on the right you will see a page that has completely has come out, and something that we all see from time to time. Now we will move into a simple repair, and you can go ahead and watch the video. The first thing that you see happening is I'm using the Filmoplast P mending tape, and because it's thinner and a little bit more flexible, I don't use the full width of the roll because it's not needed for most repairs. We recommend cutting it in half before applying. What I'm doing right there is aligning the parts of the tear by laying the paper on top of each other, then placing the Filmoplast over and rubbing it lightly. Then you see that I'm using the scissors to cut right at the end of the page to make a clean line.
Page tip-ins are another very common repair that we have to perform here. And very often that'll happen because in paperbacks they tend to fall out. Sometimes students will tear sections, whole articles, things like that out. So we're reinserting loose pages, and you can see here with this example, it's an adhesive bound book and the pages are coming out fairly easily. What Marianne is doing here is she's applying a very thin bead line of PVA along the edge of the paper, and it's very important that you not go too far in to the paper, because that puts a lot more adhesive down and makes that section, that part of the book, a little less flexible. But you do need enough for it to hold onto the spine. And if you're doing multiple pages, so let's say a student has torn out a chapter and you have to replace it. Very often from interlibrary loan we'll get photocopies. We make sure that those are printed double-sided so that they create far less bulk, but then also what we'll do, and we're not going to show that in this video, is we will glue those together as a block first and then insert them into the book, which is a lot easier. And so this is a way to really extend the life of your books and make sure that the content is there.